I told you I was hurt and nothing changed. So I stopped telling you and tried to keep the peace. Whenever your partner does something that hurts you or drops the ball or leaves you feeling unappreciated, you just swallow it. You don't say anything. You just avoid the conflict. That's the best thing you can do if your goal is to absolutely destroy your relationship. Because when you do this, you are actively doing something that is guaranteed to build resentment. And resentment is one of the most corrosive and misunderstood experiences in human psychology. Today, we're digging into resentment, how it starts, how it grows, and what you can do to actually turn it back. My name's Mike Shahade, and welcome to Your Brain. When we talk about resentment, people usually talk about it like it's a feeling. Like you got upset, couldn't let it go, and now you're resentful. But clinically speaking, that's not really accurate. See, resentment isn't a single emotion. It's more like a syndrome. It's a pattern, one so reinforcing that thinking differently about a topic can start to feel almost impossible. And the tricky part is that most people think that they can just forgive and forget. It'll magically disappear and they'll stop being upset. But in reality, that actually makes things a lot worse. See, usually resentment starts with some kind of injury, a hurt, a betrayal, a perceived inequality, something you interpret as unfair and not right. Then that injury presents itself as an emotion. You feel angry, sad, afraid, disappointed, and this is the important part. When that emotion shows up and doesn't get digested properly through repairs with that person, new insight, or real change occurring, it starts to mutate from a hurt into something deeper, something more sticky, resentment. You find yourself starting to ruminate about the situation or avoid it completely. That allows resentment to grow into something more solidifying, further solidifying itself in your mind as reality and becoming very neurologically sticky. This happens because of something we call story locking. When something goes unresolved, our brains seek a completed story. So the hurt changes from "you forgot what mattered to me" into "you never cared for me to begin with." From "you broke a promise to me" into "I can never trust you." See, the shift matters because it is the movement from a behavior-specific complaint to a global characteristic judgment. That's when that undigested emotion becomes a shift in your perception of the other person's identity. It stops becoming about what they did and starts becoming who they are. And when that happens, resentment starts to continue to feed in on itself through confirmation bias. Remember, as I said before, your brain is a pattern recognition machine. It hates unresolved things, so it creates conclusions. It hates things that conflict with its beliefs, so it amplifies evidence that supports those beliefs and minimizes evidence that go against it. So you start to ignore or simply not notice all the times that this person did keep a promise, or that they did go above and beyond because they care about you. And it starts highlighting all the times that they didn't. See, that's what resentment looks like internally, but externally, it usually shows up in one or two ways. There's hot resentment, okay? Hot resentment is the cleaner example of it. It's volatile, it's more easy to notice. Every time you bring up a hurt, it explodes into an argument. It's always critical, negative, and loud. If you're married, this is the kind of resentment that is most closely associated with early divorce. And there's cold resentment, and this one is insidious. See, cold resentment isn't as easy to spot. Cold resentment is when the overt fighting stops, but all the positive affection disappears. You stop making jokes. You stop connecting with bids. You stop reaching for each other. You find yourselves just existing in the same place, completely detached. And both of these forms of resentment come from an earlier disappointment or hurt. And both are fed and perpetuated through attempts of coping, just not the best ways of coping, either avoidance or ruminations. See, avoidance and ruminations are both things your brain tries to do to cope with an event. We can appreciate them, but also recognize the dangers they hold. Avoidance often happens after you've already tried to communicate to someone and have been let down. Maybe your attempt at communicating turned into a fight. Maybe you felt like your point was minimized. Maybe you got a half-assed apology with no actual change. Or maybe, and what I see most often, is that change did happen, just briefly, and then the same pattern went back again. And that hurts enough or happens enough that you decide that it's better just to avoid this conversation completely rather than putting yourself out there. You tell yourself that you're letting it go, but you're not. See, avoidance is not the lack of a problem. In fact, avoidance is the perfect ground for rumination to start and take over your internal monologue. Now, when we talk about rumination, there are two specific kinds I want to hit on. There's the anger rumination. This is the daydreaming after an argument about what you should have said or about how dumb or inconsiderate the other person is. About how this is just another example of how doomed the relationship is. It's a rehearsal loop, over and over, getting yourself more and more frustrated, hammering into yourself how right you are and how wrong they are. Then there's depressive ruminations, or brooding. These are more self-critical. You go over and over about how stuck you are, how dumb you are for being in this relationship to begin with, and how maybe nothing is ever going to change. Depressive ruminations are more self-critical, whereas anger ruminations are more judgment-based. Both are going to keep you stuck, and both are poison. Not just for your relationship, but honestly for your own physical well-being too. Constant ruminations mean constant stress, keeping your body in an active threat state. That's why it becomes so easy to get trapped in resentment. When you're in an active threat state, you're not really using that thinking brain of yours, your empathetic brain. You're not developing new insights very well. You're just gonna keep rehearsing the event, digging yourself deeper and deeper into that hole of resentment. This is part why people feel trapped in resentment. They know that they're in it. They often hate that they're in it. But the loop is now cognitive. It's now emotional. It's more relational, and it's more built upon your psychology. Your thinking brain that can get you out of it is disengaged, and your emotional brain is highlighted. So how do we get out of it? I told you earlier that forgive and forget can actually make resentment worse, but why is that? Well, it's because premature forgiveness for the sake of keeping the peace, you are actually teaching yourself, I can override my hurt. I can pretend that inequality isn't there. If I do it this time, things will change. But when things don't change, then what you've actually taught yourself is how dangerous it is to forgive. How I should never forgive this person because last time it just ended up in me getting hurt. And see, that's a scary lesson to teach yourself because it can spread into other relationships that don't deserve that same kind of rigidity. I have a more detailed video on apologies and forgiveness that can explain this a bit further and why we actually want apologies and forgiveness to be selfish. So check that out. But for the sake of this video, I want you to imagine this. Trying to force forgiveness when you are deep in resentment is like trying to jump out of a pit of quicksand. The harder you thrash about, the deeper you're going to sink in. So to get out of quicksand, you don't jump up and move around quickly, you widen your base. You make very small, deliberate moves. That means you do not start with forgiveness, you start with fairness and repair. This video is a great step in identifying what kind of rumination cycles are starting. And then you need to start to interrupt that rumination cycle by signaling your brain that responsiveness and fairness can actually exist in this environment. And you do that through tiny, actionable behavioral changes by forcing yourself to be on a scavenger hunt of positivity in your relationship, noting the things that your partner is actually doing that you do find yourself appreciative of. To tackle resentment in a very achievable way, we need to first lay out where resentment actually is. So pause the video right now and grab a piece of paper. All right, we back? Great. Now I want you to write down these 5 prompts, okay? 1, target. Who or what am I angry at? 2, cause. What action or broken promise or violated expectations keep replaying in your head? 3, impact. How did this affect you? Not just logically, how did it affect your trust, your sense of self-respect, or a sense of safety, autonomy, or maybe even closeness? Now, take a deep breath and look at this emotion wheel. Is it on the screen? Likely the first emotion to pop up is anger. Now 4, we want to understand the underlying emotion underneath the anger. Is it fear, grief, helplessness, shame, feeling unseen? I want you to take your time and sit with that emotion and try to notice where in your body you actually feel that emotion. 5, what need is this emotion pointing to? Is it repair? Is it consistency, fairness, boundaries, to be taken seriously? Nice job. After those 5 steps, we have some really solid groundwork down. What your resentment is, we can actually start evaluating its impact on your relationship. I want you to rate the following categories on a scale of 0 to 4. Okay, how burdensome it feels for you. 0 being not at all, 4 being unbearable. On these categories, ready? Equality, 0 to 4. Feeling seen, repair, trust, intimacy, stress. Still with me? Okay, good job. The last part, I promise. This last part, I want you to rate how much you're maintaining this resentment. Again, on a scale of 0 to 4. 0 being never, 4 being constantly. Okay? Rate these areas that you find yourself doing it. Depressive, ruminations. Anger, ruminations. Avoidance or withdrawal from the relationship, or unforgiveness, motivation. Okay, great. Now we have a solid layout of where you are with your resentment. And with that, we can actually start targeting the next steps. If the burden scores are high, but maintenance is low, that means that you're not really ruminating about this, but it's a big freaking deal for you. So we want to tackle it before the maintenance gets higher. That means we need some concrete renegotiation of expectations with the partner. We need to tackle it now and we need to express our feelings and needs to our partner. If burden is low but maintenance is high, you're likely more stuck on how your mind is replaying and perceiving the hurt than on what is actually happening. Something way far back has never been digested and it won't go away. That points to a lot more rumination work, a lot more emotional processing you have to do about that past hurt, and then interrupting that loop when ruminations start. If both scores are high, then we need to focus on stabilizing the current situation. Your relationship is in danger. You need to reduce avoidance, because that's probably happening, and increase repair attempts as much as you can before you try to solve anything else. This isn't easy. Okay, if you're both deeply stuck in resentment, that might be a good indicator to seek additional help for your relationship. And frankly, if the other person is not on board with working on this resentment together, that may force you to reconsider the actual validity of the relationship itself, because resentment's not going to go anywhere unless you both put in some effort. So the long and short of it is that resentment is not proof that your relationship is doomed, okay? It's proof that something important has gone unprocessed for far too long. When things get unprocessed, our brain seeks closure and begins to develop scripts that feed into our own biases. But when a relationship can focus on fairness, responsiveness, appreciations, and actual repair attempts, resentment can fade, and your relationship can become stronger and more protected for future resentments than it was before. Your focus with resentment should not be, I need to be less angry. It should be, what is unresolved? What need is not being met? And what kind of repair am I yearning for? But let me know down below, what feels more real to you? Hot resentment or cold resentment? My name's Mike Shahade, and I'm happy you're here. See ya.